Hello, this is Jonathan Lampel with Blender HD, and today I've got a tutorial for you about how to render realistic oceans in cycles with foam. So there's a few things I'm going to be covering in this video. First off, let me show you a few examples because I always um, like to see examples beforehand. So I'll just show you kind of where I started out with. I first made this thing, and I've got this kind of floating along with some foam on the oceans, but it looks really bad. The ocean, the material, it looks awful. There's no wake behind the boat, and it's just generally, it's not even a very good render. So discarded that one. This one looks better. You can see here it's actually, floating on the river, or whatever's going on, and we've got some foam here, and it looks nicer, it looks cleaner, but you can see it's really harsh, really sharp, and it kind of um, it doesn't move super very naturally, and um, the the resolution of the foam depends completely on the resolution of the ocean. So I had to crank this up to like 30 in order to render it like this, and that took a long time. And then finally, a couple days ago, I figured out a good way to do it. So here's the result. I'm sure you could push this a lot farther if you wanted to. This is just a really quick material, quick settings, whatever. But we have something floating in the ocean. This one's not an animation, it's just a picture, but it'll give you an example. It's got some wake around it, which you could, make into a boat going back and forth. And you've got your material with foam here. So, and overall, it looks fairly realistic, especially kind of from farther away, but even up close it looks alright. Okay, so without further ado, let's just jump in and make it. I will try to just hit the major points without, wasting any of your time, so I don't think I'll go too fast, but I won't go too slow either. So starting out, let's just use the default cube and add the ocean modifier. There are plenty of tutorials out there giving an introduction to it, so I will just skip through some of the settings, but I'll tell you a few things that really bother me when people do them. So I'm going to change this from 7 to 15 just for a good preview right now. You can see that just makes the waves look better, and maybe I want this to be a little bit bigger ocean, so I'll change the spatial size to like 75. It doesn't really matter. Bigger oceans, bigger spatial size, self-explanatory there. Second, what I want is I want to decide how choppy I want the water. And this is kind of deceiving because when I say choppy, I'm thinking, rough ocean waves or something. So you might say, oh, choppiness, let's turn up the choppiness. But if I turn that up to 5, you get this kind of, tightened. It's pulling the vertices in closer towards the edges. And, it does definitely look choppier, but it doesn't really give the large tall waves that you want. I mean, you can make this bigger and lower that, and you do get choppy waves, but that's not really the best way to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave those both at 1 for now, and I'm going to turn down the wind velocity. Now this is kind of weird because if you turn the wind velocity up to 75, you're going to get a smoother result. However, if I turn it down to say 15, maybe even lower, like 12. There we go. When you start turning it down, you get these kind of taller peaked waves, maybe even lower. There we go. You get these really rough waters, and it's counterintuitive because you think rough waters you'd have really high wind. Maybe this is backwards. I don't really know the reason, but you can go ahead and play with that, and you can play with the choppiness as well. So you don't want to, you gotta average them out a little bit because you don't want these pieces where it's kind of like going through itself, and that looks really bad. So please be careful not to do that because it definitely looks awful if you don't do it right. So just be careful of that. And I'll go with a nice medium. I think that looks good. And then scale if you want it to make, whoa, that's too big. If you want bigger waves, you can do whatever. I'll leave it at 2. Looks like it's still a bit choppy. Maybe I'll change that to 10. Make sure I don't have anything intersecting. 1.8. Okay, there we go. So we have our ocean. That was simple enough. And now let's get into the other stuff. First, let's just animate the ocean. So a quick way to do that is to animate the time. So hovering over this, I'm going to press I to inset a keyframe, and then on frame, let's just go 100 because I just want to demonstrate something for you. On frame 100, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. That one, okay. On frame 100, I will inset a keyframe for, let's go with 10, see how that looks. Okay, so it's looking a little bit fast. So I will jump to that keyframe, maybe make it like, let's go 7. Okay, that's good. And if I play this back, you can see that it looks kind of stupid because it's starting out really slow, speeding up, and slowing down at the end. And, you know, as I looked up examples of realistic oceans and cycles, I saw this a lot, and it's really easy to fix, and it just looks kind of silly. So all you got to do is jump into the graph editor, and you see we have our keyframes for the ocean time here. So there it is, and you can see that it's kind of sloping. So it's starting out slow, speeding up, and ending up slow. So the easy way to fix this is just select everything with A, hit V, and select vector. So now we have these completely straight lines. But I want this animation to go entirely through frame 250. In fact, I want to make it as long as I want, with still having the ocean being the same speed. And I don't want to adjust it every time I have to, you know, go a little bit farther. Say I wanted to make this 260, then I don't want to go back and reanimate it. So now all I have to do, with these selected, go to Channel and Extrapolation Mode and change that to Linear. So there we go. Before I had constant, where it would start out here, I guess I can't use a grease pencil here. It would start out here, move up, and then continue along like that. But linear extrapolation just means that it keeps going in a line forever, and so no matter where you are on the timeline, it's always going to be animated, no matter how far you go on either direction. Actually, you can't really go negative, but okay, so that's very, very cool. And let's go to making objects float. So I'm going to add a monkey. I'll have Suzanne stranded out in the ocean. Rotate her a little bit, like that. I don't know, whatever. One thing, you got to make sure your scale looks good. One thing that looked awful in my animation earlier, my first example, is that the scale was completely off, and that made it look very bad. So just make sure that the scale of your waves matches the scale of your scene, because that's another thing that I see a lot, and it really gives away the fact that it's fake. So just be sure you got that right, and then I'm going to smooth shade and add a subdivision surface. Okay, so I have her nice and placed in the water exactly where I want, but you can see if I change this, I want to change this to 10, or I want to change this to 20. It moves, and she might not necessarily be sitting on it, especially if I change like the scale and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use dynamic paint, and so to do this, I'm going to add a UV sphere, scale it up, and you know, if this was a choppy ocean, then I would scale it up on a Z. So this just makes it so it's always going to be touching it, and so the ocean waves won't like peak over the sphere or something. So that's just extra precaution there. And then I'm going to go into the physics, add dynamic paint, and brush. And with the ocean, I'm going to add dynamic paint and canvas. In Blender 2.66, it makes this little grid thing when you add dynamic paint to an ocean. Kind of bothers me, and I'll probably report it as a bug. But in the meantime, you can just change this to texture, and we're all good. So I can actually see something, I'm going to change the lamp, change that to a sun, and there we go. So now I can actually see what's going on. And if I hide this sphere, you can see that it's painting inside, right there. But I don't necessarily want it to do that. Actually, first I need to animate it. So what I can do is I'm going to move it over to the side of the ocean, or wherever you'd like, and I'm going to press I, insert location, and then at the very end, I'm going to move it over here, hit I, and insert location. So you can go back and do the keyframing thing again if you want to make it even. In this case, I don't really mind if it speeds up because, you know, it's going through the water, but if you want it to make an even motion, then you can do that. And as you can see, as it goes along, it kind of paints onto the ocean. And now, what we're going to do to make this actually float is I'm going to move this so it's directly inside. There we go, and it's sitting right on it. And I'm going to change this to wired view so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to change the paint type in the ocean's properties. I'm going to change that from paint to weight. You can see that just adds a weight paint. And I'm going to turn on fade and change this to 1. So now as this goes along, it creates a weight paint that just pretty much dissolves right after it leaves. So we have a spot of weight paint that is, you know, right there and nowhere else. So it's not leaving like a trail or anything. And then I have to make sure to go in the output and add that. So now you can see that it's added a weight paint group there. So I can select the monkey, add constraint, copy rotation, copy location. So in the rotation, I'm going to choose cube because that's our ocean, but I'm going to rename that to ocean there. And then use vertex group, dynamic paint weight. So there we go. And I'm going to do the same thing with copy rotation, ocean, dynamic paint weight. And there we go. So now you can see that not only is it following along the sphere, it is also bobbing up and down in the water. And since we have this scaled up on the Z, it's always going to have a spot somewhere. And you can see it doesn't necessarily follow it exactly, it lags behind a little bit, but overall that's okay. And that looks good. One thing, doesn't really look like it's floating anymore since it's rotated, but what I can do is I can go into edit mode, rotate it however I'd like. I kind of had it rotated like that before. Move it down a bit. And now as I play it back, it's now floating in the ocean, and very, very cool. So now I'm just going to go ahead and hide this because we're not going to need that anymore. And I'm going to add one more thing. And I'm going to add another canvas. So you can see that in this case it's viewing the paint, and then this one is the weight, and you can only view one at a time. And now I'm going to take the monkey and I'm going to add that to dynamic paint and add brush. So now you have two dynamic paint brushes, but for one, we don't want the monkey influencing the weight because that would mess things up, and we don't want these the sphere influencing the paint because, you know, that would screw things up. So an easy way to fix this is just go to the object properties here, and with the monkey selected, add to the group and make this paint. Then with the sphere selected, I'm going to add that to a group and choose weight. So now if we select the ocean here, and in the first one, make sure this is the weight category, I can change this to weight, and only the sphere is going to be influenced there. And then in the surface, I'm going to change this to paint, and only the monkey is going to influence the paint. So now if you see, if I am viewing this, that the sphere is no longer influencing the paint, but only the monkey, and this is the start of our boat foam. You can see that it's a start. It's not the best so far, but we can fix that for sure. First of all, let's turn on anti-aliasing. That'll help things, just smooth things out. I don't know why I just did that. Okay, and now make sure you output both the paint map and the wet map so we can use it later. And then I'm going to actually be viewing the wet map because we're not going to use the paint map, we're going to use the wet map for putting it into cycles, and I'll show you why in a minute. I will turn on dry. I'll change this to like 150. This is just going to say how long our boat wake is going to last. And with dynamic paint effects, I'm going to use spread. So let's go ahead and see how this works. So you can see it's spreading out a little bit, and then after some time, it's kind of drying, and that looks pretty good. Maybe for something of that motion, it's not. Maybe it's drying a little too slow. So I'll go ahead and change that to 75. Okay, that looks pretty good. Obviously, like an object like this wouldn't be really making that kind of foam without a motor, but whatever, use your interpretation. Maybe Suzanne is a boat, you never know. Alright, so now with the monkey selected, I'm going to make sure that the wetness is set to 1 and change the mesh volume. You can see that right now it's using the volume of that. I'm going to change that to mesh volume and proximity. What that does, it just makes a little edge around here, and you can influence this however much you like. If you want it, a big area around, you can set that to 3. I'll just leave it at 1 for now. Alright, so we're looking good now, and I think we're set to go ahead and go into cycles. And I don't really want either of these viewed, so I'll just leave it like that. So I'm going to switch over to my materials layout. I've got some custom layouts. If you don't know how to do that, look in my other videos and you'll see how to do it. It's really handy. So I've just got a node editor here, a timeline, a 3D view, and a window that I'll be rendering in. Alright, so to make an ocean, let's just go ahead and start our preview render here. And I don't like where the camera is, so let's place it at a better location. Let's say we want it kind of looking down as on the monkey as it passes, maybe like there. Try not to get the edges of the ocean visible. Okay, there we go. Awesome. So now we have our view. Let's go ahead and set the lighting. So the lighting is pretty simple. We're just gonna take the sun, make sure it's pointed in the direction that we want, and I've got it set to a fairly low size there. If you set it too high, it's gonna look a little bit different. In this case, it doesn't make a huge difference, really. Whatever you think is best for the size of your scene. Alright, so let's go ahead and start making this.